Hi, well, welcome everyone to the pupil application webinar from 39 Essex Chambers. This is some of your speakers, others of us will be joining later on. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Lindsay Scott. I'm the CEO at 39 Essex Chambers. I've been here for about 3 years. I've been in clerking for a lot longer, more than 20. Before that, I was a solicitor. I practiced both at Clyde & Co, Lee Day, and also in-house. And then I saw the error of my ways and I joined a barrister's chambers, but in clerking, in legal management, instead of as a barrister. Why am I telling you all of that? Because I think it's just interesting to know what people's individual routes to the bar are. And I am going to ask all of our speakers when it comes to their turn to introduce themselves and tell you what their route to the bar was. And I'm also going to get them to tell you one interesting fact about themselves. So why are we doing this? We've done it for a number of years. We used to do it in person before COVID. And I actually preferred it in person because I like to see you all and I like to see, if you're engaged or not engaged, and whether you're enjoying what we're saying or not enjoying what we're saying. But online has meant that we are able to get to a much wider audience, and it's much more accessible. So we're doing it online. You can also pass it on to colleagues or friends and listen to us or see us at another point because we put it on the website. The Pupillage Gateway has opened. It's a very, very stressful time for all of you that are preparing applications. Good luck to all of you. It's a pretty hideous process, isn't it? No getting around that. We're doing this to try and help. We hope that it will help in all of your applications, but obviously we are sort of looking at 39 Essex Chambers. But what we say is relevant to all the applications that you're going to be making, to all the sets that you're going to be making it to. What we're hoping is that after listening to all of us for over an hour, that you'll have a better understanding of who we are, what our culture is, what we're like. I was thinking that perhaps I should give you a sort of guided tour with my iPad, but that might make you feel a bit sort of sick. It's like a bit like being on a boat, isn't it? But I am in one of the conference rooms, and it's very nice. I don't know if you can see, but it's all very smart and nice, and we've got balconies outside, lovely views that look over Lincoln's Inn Fields and the Royal Courts of Justice. Some of the other people are in chambers. So Nicola Cohn is in chambers there. I think you're in your room, aren't you, Nicola? Yeah. And Chris, are you in your room in chambers?
Yeah, I'm also in my room.
Yeah, you're in your room. Sheraton, you look like you're in another conference room. Yeah, I think so. And then everyone else has got their black backgrounds sort of blurry, but so goodness knows where they are. Anyway, we wanted it to give you a bit of a feeling about us. I know that getting mini pupillages is very difficult. Our mini pupillage process has changed. I think somebody will be telling you a bit about that later on. And so we wanted to give you a sort of feel about what our chambers is like, what we're looking for. We do want you to ask questions, and I know that that's difficult when it's online, but we've got a question place that you can write in questions. I'll either answer the question straight away, or I'll come back to you later, or I'll get one of the speakers to answer the questions. So do put the questions in, and I'll try and make sure that we answer them as we go along. No question is a silly question. So welcome again. Thank you very much. Do give me feedback at the end. If try and remember to ask for that. But if we're going to do it again next year, it'd be good to be doing stuff that's actually relevant and interesting to you. So if there was stuff that we're doing that's not relevant, let's know. And if there's stuff that we haven't covered that you think would be interesting, then also let us know that as well. So without further ado, it's me and Vikram again. And we are going to talk to you about 39 Essex Chambers practice areas. And Vikram, I'm going to kick off by saying I think we've probably got the widest range of practice areas of any set at the bar. Do you think I'm going too far on that one?
No, I'm sure that's right, Lindsay. Yeah.
Think I'm exaggerating? Yeah. I think it would be fair to say that the only areas we don't do really are blood and guts crime and we've done some, maybe criminal fraud we don't really do, and family work, as in custody and divorces, and everything else we touch on. We have some areas that we're really specialists in: healthcare sector, sports sector, commercial, construction, PI, clinical negligence, planning, property, environment, public law, everything that we cover in sort of public law. But we do cover an awful lot of areas. We cover an awful lot of areas because we've got an awful lot of barristers. So about 200 barristers. On every publication that I see, it's a different number. And that's probably because, somebody else has arrived. And sometimes people count our academic members or our arbitrator members, and sometimes they don't. But if we counted all the people that are offering legal services in some capacity at 39 Essex Chambers, it's around 200 people. And that's in 3 offices. We do have a very tiny kind of toehold in Manchester, but really we're in 3 offices. Mostly the mothership, our headquarters is in London, 81 Chancery Lane. And then we have a very nice chambers in Maxwell Chambers in Singapore, where we have 2 members of staff, and between a kind of, we've always got at least 4 to 5 members there, and then quite often a lot more members, either going out on cases or arbitrations, or being based in the region for some reason. And then we have a very, very small barristers' chambers in the arbitration centre building in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And we've got 1 permanent member based there, and again more people that go in and out, pay visits too. So that's why we have so many practice areas, because we have a lot of barristers who are all specialists in all those different areas. And we have a number of Vikram, you sent me something that you wanted me to read out, and I now lost it. So you might have to take over at this point.
I can do that, certainly, yes. So thank you very much, Lindsay. So we do lots of different areas of work. Now, that may sound like a daunting prospect, but the reality is, the hope is that you'll be working with us for many years, many decades. And I personally think it's a lot of fun to do lots of different areas, because why would you want to stick to one area? There are different areas that are a lot of fun. So one day you might do a judicial review case. Another day you might do a commercial law case. Third day you might do a regulatory case about a professional who may or may not have slipped up. And all of these things are basically law. So you go to a court hearing and you listen to submissions on the law that to do with acts of parliament in court cases, and you try and get your person to win. That's basically it. So I think,
Vikram, you do a lot of different areas of law, but
I
think it would be fair to say that we also have some people who only specialize in one particular area. So it's as a pupil coming in, you obviously see all the different areas of law. We encourage you to do that even as a junior tenant, so that But if you want to specialize in one particular area, then people do that as well.
Exactly. But if you compare us to a restaurant, we have a very large and varied menu, and it's up to you when you turn up here what you choose off that menu. You can just specialize in one area, or you can have a starter, a main course, and a pudding, and maybe even a second pudding if you want one. Anyway, my point is that we do specialize in a lot of different areas. I should say a little bit about myself. I came to the bar after doing medicine and law at university, and in the past I've been a junior doctor. I've also been a law tutor at university for about 5 years in different fields, and even before that I was a travel agent for a year in my year off, which was possibly the most fun of all those jobs. But anyway, I'm not really meant to say that, am I?
Well, you learn something all the time, Vikram. I didn't know that one.
No, I know all about which fares to get to which country. I grew up in Sweden, actually. That's an unusual fact about me, and I like going back to Sweden. And I practiced in a wide combination of public law, regulatory, commercial, and medical law. And I actually did also, even though we don't do family, I did do a divorce case involving the Dubai ruler. So we even do things we're not meant to do sometimes. But as I say, it's all law, and you can certainly pick it up. We have core areas represented by 4 groups: public law, commercial and construction, property, environment and planning, and common law. But each of these groups does work at the highest level, up to the Supreme Court. And we've been involved in some really key cases every year. For instance, this year, the Pan-NOx emissions group litigation, that's the Dieselgate litigation. Then the new lottery company, the Gambling Commission, that's the National Lottery License Competition Challenge, and also a big auditor's negligence claim worth nearly 3 billion called NMC Health and Ernst & Young. So we do a very wide range of work at the highest level. And I think it's a plus to have a diverse practice. We also take on, this will be of great interest to you, very many of our pupils. I think we've had 11 pupils in the last, is it 3 or 4 years, Lindsay? And we've taken
5 years. So in the last 5 years, we've had 11 pupils.
And how many have we taken on, Lindsay?
10.
10 out of 11, which is, I think, 91%. So just in summary, I think my time is up now. It's an absolutely brilliant place to work. We are serious about recruiting pupils, and please do consider joining us.
Great, thanks very much, Vikram. Didn't know that you were brought up in Sweden. Do you speak Swedish?
Oh, not a word, no.
All right, okay. Well, thank you very much. So I think from that, what we take is very wide practice areas. You will be asked to do a wide variety of work as a pupil in 4 different seats, 3 different offices, do quite a lot of international work. I think we were meant to talk about our ethos as well. I'm hoping that our ethos will come across in this webinar, but our ethos is we have 3 sort of key ethos or areas, and that is that we think we are excellent, we think we are innovative, and we think we're inclusive. So those are our 3 values, I suppose, that we try and do make decisions against and hold ourselves up to. Okay, I'm going to move on then, and we're going to talk about life as a pupil at 39 Essex Chambers. And we've got Sam and Monty going to talk to us about that. I don't know how you split it up, Sam and Monty, and I will probably interrupt you, for which I apologise now. So over to you.
No problem. Thank you, Lindsay. My name is Monty, and I'm one of the newest tenants together with Sam. So Sam and I were pupils together. And we're going to tell you a bit about life as a pupil in 39. So prior to coming to Chambers, I studied philosophy, and I then worked in policy as a civil servant and then at an NGO before transitioning to the law. I'm actually currently taking a year out from practice at Chambers, and I'm working at the Supreme Court as a judicial assistant. My interesting fact is that I have 3 citizenships, and I'm currently applying for my 4th. So I'm going to cover now the broad structure of pupillage and daily life as a pupil, as well as feedback and assessment. And then Sam is going to cover our in-house training, as well as Chambers' environment, wellbeing and pastoral support. So in terms of the broad structure of pupillage, we do a 12-month pupillage starting around September, October, with a practicing second 6. Pupillage is structured into 4 seats corresponding to each of Chambers' 4 practice groups. So the first is construction and commercial law, second is public law, third is planning and environmental law, fourth is civil liability, which is mostly personal injury and clinical negligence, although there is some other stuff in there as well. So each seat is about 8 to 10 weeks. They vary in rank slightly. One of the great strengths of Chambers is you're going to see all of that wide range of work. I think, as has been touched on already, it is one of the great strengths of Chambers, and it's something that I particularly enjoyed as someone who didn't do law at university, really having a strong grounding in more or less all of the major areas of law. So in each seat, you're going to have 2 supervisors at least. Some of the seats we have 3, but there is sort of a baseline of 2. Again, this is a little unusual. Most other chambers I know from my friends, you will normally only have 1 supervisor in a seat. But again, I think it's an advantage having 2, because it means that you're going to see a greater diversity of work, both within the practice area, because not only do we do a wide range of work around those 4 different practice areas, but within the practice areas themselves, there is a huge variety of work. So taking, for example, construction and commercial, you might have a supervisor that more specializes in construction law and does a lot of construction litigation, and you might have a supervisor that does other forms of commercial litigation. And similarly, in public law, one of my supervisors did a lot of work which was based around immigration, and another of my supervisors did work which was more based around community care and quarter protection and things like that. So that was a really great part of the structure, because in each seat you got to see basically everything that the seat had to offer.
And some of those seats, Monty, and some of those supervisors can be silks, can't they?
Yes. So in my public law seat, during my seat, my two supervisors became silks, which is not something I can take any credit for. I think that my co-pupil Santosh, I think was the pupil before they became silks. So he, I think, of course, takes all the credit for that. But no, it was an amazing experience, and particularly, you know, seeing the work change that they started to get in, and getting to sort of an insight into that. So what does daily life look like? So we have a 9 to 6 policy, which Sam is going to talk a little bit more about. So my day started at 9 a.m. And your working day will be split between doing written assessed work for your supervisor and shadowing them in various ways. So that will be attending court with them, going to conferences with clients, mediations, anything that your supervisor will do, they will invite you along to see how it works. And that's one of the sort of the best bits of learning, is just to try and learn from osmosis, see how the practicalities of life at the bar are done, managing your diary, finances. Your supervisor will go through all those kinds of things that you may not necessarily think about. They will alert you to that, so you get sort of that holistic training of how to practice at the bar. So in terms of the types of written work that you'll do advices, pleadings, research notes for your supervisor. You'll have a mix of work which is both live, so work which they're currently doing, and also work which they've done before, but will be picked out because they are very representative of the area, maybe have some really good learning points in them. And I found that really useful. They'll normally structure it so you start doing slightly easier cases or easier advices and pleadings at the beginning, and you work up to doing more difficult things as you go on. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the work that is given to you, rather than you just getting random things that go with their diary. And then in the live cases, you know, you really do get to contribute to your supervisor's work. So in my commercial seat, my supervisor had a 2-week trial. I attended every day of trial with them. When points of law arose that were unexpected, he asked me to do research notes with them. So you really do feel like you are involved in their work, and getting a sort of a very realistic experience of what life at the bar is like. So turning then to feedback and assessment. So pupils are assessed using the same criteria as pupillage applicants. So that's intellectual ability, expressive ability, interpersonal skills, commitment, resilience, and efficiency, and interest in one or more areas of law in which Chambers specializes. And Chambers runs continuous assessment. So what that means is that on every piece of work you will get feedback. 90% of the time, this is written feedback. You might go it through orally with your supervisor as well. This will be on things you did well and points to improve. And whilst it may sound quite daunting, exhausting to think, okay, every single piece of work that I'm doing is assessed, that continuous feedback for me was, again, one of the most useful aspects of pupillage, because it means you always know where you stand, and all of that feedback is collated. And at the halfway and full way point of your seat, so that will be normally about 4 weeks in, and then again at 8 weeks in, you will get a written feedback report which will summarize it. And at halfway point, it will be a qualitative sort of assessment of, you know, Monty is doing well in this, he's not doing so well in this, we would like to see him improve in this. And that is, again, really helpful, because it means that you know if there are any concerns and you can take steps to address them, rather than you being kept in the dark to the final decision day and you've got no idea where you stand with your supervisor. We do have some one-off assessments towards the end of the seat. So two had written advices for some senior members of Chambers and an advocacy assessment. But again, the focus is on the work that you're doing throughout the year. The decision itself is taken around July. The way it works is that the Pupillage committee, comprised of all your supervisors and some other members of Chambers, they look at all the work that you've done, and then they will make a recommendation to Chambers Management Board, who will then normally approve the decision, but they do have a free decision. One aspect of that structure I'd like to emphasize is that normally there is no collective vote in Chambers. Technically, I think it can go to a collective vote, but I've never heard of that happening. And I think that was really great for me throughout Pupillage, because it means every time you bump into a member of Chambers in the corridor, you have a conversation with them as a normal person, rather than worrying about the fact that in 7 months' time, they're going to be voting on you, and it could be on anything which they choose to vote on you. And I know that from my friends at Chambers, where they do have a collective vote, that is one of the most stressful aspects of Pupillage. So assessment here is entirely based on the quality of your work, and not on sort of arbitrary things about how you've done in a conversation in the corridor. So that's my part of Life as a Pupil. I'm going to hand over now to Sam.
Thanks, Monty.
Thanks, Monty. Good afternoon. I'm Samuel. I'm one of Chambers' newest tenants as well. I was taken on alongside Monty last July. My journey to the bar is perhaps not the traditional route, but I think it's becoming more and more common. Like Vikram and I think a few people here, I'm a career changer. I studied French and Arabic at university before going on to become a teacher for a couple of years, teaching French, English, and frankly, everything else they wanted me to teach. Food technology. I spent a bit of time teaching PE. And then I decided to retrain when COVID hit, and I'm very pleased I did. I went on to do the GDL and the bar course at City, and then on to Pupillage here at 39 Essex. My interesting fact about myself is that I spent a summer goat herding in the south of France, but I wasn't very good at it and didn't manage to keep hold of many of the goats. So I came back to London. I'm talking to you about in-house training and Chambers environment. And the first thing is that training, pupils at 39 benefit, I think, from two different types of training. The first, which you've heard about from Monty, is the training given by supervisors through their rigorous yet nurturing feedback on your work. But there are also training opportunities through exposure to how supervisors and other members of Chambers work, their advocacy in different courts and tribunals when you're shadowing them. Training opportunities also present themselves when watching members of Chambers interact with clients, or when you discuss case strategy with them, or talking through different aspects of practice management as a self-employed barrister. And these are all ad hoc training opportunities, but our experience was that all our supervisors made a big effort to include us pupils in their thought processes and to create opportunities for learning and training beyond simply feeding back on our written work. It's also worth mentioning that, as Vikram said, we are a leading set in many of our practice areas. Pupils get incredible exposure as a result to senior barristers at the top of their respective fields, and that gives pupils the amazing experience of learning from some of the leading silks and senior juniors at the bar, doing some of the best work in those different practice areas. I've noted down a few examples. During Pupillage, I was exposed to the Post Office inquiry, the Grenfell Tower claims, the Rugby claims, Rwanda, some really interesting capacity work, some of the first cases arising out of the Building Safety Act, some interesting work with the FOS, some really high value construction cases with interesting cross-border components, and even some international PI work. So we really do everything, and we see the best of what is available at the English bar, which is really exciting. I found it really useful to have supervisors and other members of Chambers willing to talk things through with me, whether that be a legal, ethical, or professional practice management question, or simply to identify the right book to consult or the right person to talk to. The doors of barristers at 39, and this is quite cliche, are always open, and people are looking out for you. And I know that is not a universal experience of pupillage everywhere. So I did appreciate that, and it's worth thinking about as you make your applications. The second aspect of training is the in-house program of training which 39 organises for pupils. And the first obvious component of that is advocacy. All pupils have to undertake an advocacy course at their Inn of Court or an Inn of Court. But I found our in-house advocacy training much more useful and bespoke to my strengths and weaknesses, because there were only 3 of us, and we had exposure to some really, I don't want to say seasoned, but experienced advocacy trainers and senior silks acting as judges who gave us constant feedback on different aspects of advocacy. And that meant lots of opportunities to get things wrong, to improve, to talk through lines of questioning, and to develop useful techniques for dealing with cantankerous judges and challenging witnesses. I won't name any names. But in these sorry, Lindsay?
I said shame.
Yeah, well, I can tell you afterwards. So we had training sessions in case strategy and chief examination, cross-examination, which we were always reminded doesn't involve being cross. Submissions, applications, we undertook a whole trial advocacy exercise. And while, of course, it does feature in 39's assessment criteria, we were reminded repeatedly that the advocacy training sessions really were an opportunity to improve. And it went a long way to building up confidence and competence in advance of us starting on our feet and the practicing second 6, which is in and of itself an amazing training opportunity, given the relative simplicity of the cases pupils are instructed on. It's quite useful training ground when it comes to witness handling, making submissions and dealing with judges, interacting with clients, advising on discrete points, and so on. We also received specific training on professional ethics as a baby barrister, and on the particular types of lower value civil claims in the county court that pupils are regularly instructed on, such as quantum only MOJ stage 3s or credit hire cases and road traffic accidents. And I really felt that training set us up to succeed when we were on our feet. It was a shock, but it wasn't as much of a shock as it could have been. And finally, we also received useful training on the other practice areas, which we didn't have time to be exposed properly to during pupillage. And I think there are plans to improve this moving forward. But things like quarter protection and costs and other aspects of Chambers practice, which are really important to Chambers, but which, given that we only have a year, we didn't have lots of exposure to. Chambers environment. Nicola and Chris are going to talk to you about well-being, I think, more generally. But it's worth talking about what Chambers feels like as a pupil, because there's no doubt that pupillage is hard, and however lovely and encouraging your supervisors are, and however transparent the process is, pupillage is stressful. But I think, and I think my co-pupils also felt, that Chambers puts in place really sensible systems to support you. For a start, all pupil supervisors are uniformly understanding, attentive, patient, and lovely. A few of them on the call, so I had to say that. They understand the stress of being a pupil, of coming to new areas of the law, of not knowing where to look for answers. And they are all brilliant teachers with very reasonable expectations on the whole. And that goes, I think, a long way to improving the experience of the pupillage year. And as Monty hinted at, there is a 9 to 6 rule which guarantees work-life balance. You can't take your laptop home. And stresses to one side. I think I had a better work-life balance during pupillage than I had done for many years. And that rule is policed rigorously, and we all fell foul of it, with members of Chambers sticking their heads round the door to shoo us out of the building at 6:05. But that said, you're also treated as an adult, and you're not really watched over. You're not told when to have lunch or when to take a break. You're free to structure your day around the work that you have to complete, and you're also made to feel part of the Chambers family, and you're invited to Chambers drinks each week, to networking events, to the Christmas party, which was held in the wonderful champagne bar, was it Pall Mall, I think, this year, which was beautiful.
Institute of Directors. It was quite nice, wasn't it?
It was lovely, lovely. Yeah, and members of Chambers are always taking an interest in how you are as a pupil, and you're always being taken out for lunch or for coffees. And there's also a wonderful rule that pupils never pay, which, although quite uncomfortable, is very lovely. And I think as a result of that, the feeling that Monty was adverting to, that every interaction with a member of Chambers is potentially another assessment opportunity, really does go away. For example, when I had my first case during my second 6, I remember a couple of more senior members of Chambers coming up to me at Chambers drinks, asking me how it had gone, even though I definitely not told them it was happening. And they patiently listened to me as I explained set out my rather humdrum war stories of my time at Watford County Court. People really they do take an interest, and they're very encouraging and supportive. On pastoral support, which Nicola's going to talk to more directly. But of course, pupils can always talk to their supervisors. But at 39, every pupil is given a pair of buddies who are recent tenants, and they engage very actively and wonderfully to take you out for lunch or a little walk around Lincoln's Inn or a quick coffee, so you can let off some steam or talk through those awkward, difficult questions that you really don't want to ask your supervisors or even your co-pupils. Monty, I promise there weren't that many of those. And it's worth remembering that only the people on the pupillage committee can feed into the decision, which means the buddy system is actually a very useful source of confidential support. I think we're just going past our time, but to end on a soppy note, I think I expected pupillage to be a really scary and difficult year. And while of course there were less pleasant moments, I think we do. I say we, it still sounds strange to me to say we. 39 does an amazing job of making the process transparent, highly stimulating, and at times quite a lot of fun. It's hard, but it's fair, and I think you have the opportunity to impress and also to learn. And of course, happy to answer any questions in the Q&A. Thanks, Lindsay.
Lovely segue, Samuel. Thank you very much. Into some questions, and we've got a couple already, and I'm just going to answer them really quickly. So one was about how useful are languages in practice at 39. At the beginning, we're not using languages very much, so not as but always useful to have languages. And I think if you have languages, you can use them at 39. It's not something we look at as part of the criteria. It's not going to get you any extra points or anything. But certainly if the world is getting smaller, we do an awful lot of international work, especially in construction and commercial, but also in environmental and public, and languages can be very, very helpful. So I know that a number of junior tenants have used their languages. We had someone who used Italian because we were doing a big case at the Vatican. We've got some people who speak Mandarin and Arabic, and they use that a lot. I don't know if, Samuel, you've used your French a lot yet in court, but certainly in our sports cases in the Court of Arbitration for Sport, some of those are in French. In the ICJ, French is very useful. So, so yes, languages are always useful, but they're, and if you want to keep going with languages, then, going somewhere where you've got the opportunity to do international work would be a good idea. The other question that we have is, we've been doing a lot of talking about how wide the variety of our practice is, but what happens if you come knowing that you want to do one area? We have had people that have come knowing they wanted to do one area or having done that before. So we've got somebody who was an engineer before they came. They knew that they wanted to do construction work. They are now doing construction work, but they liked the ability to have a wider look at things during pupillage and in their first year of tenancy, when you are put in the CLG group and you are expected to do a wide range of, it's a further sort of training opportunity, really. So it's to get you into sort of all sorts of different tribunals, getting you into the county court, doing all sorts of different kinds of cases in London and all over the country, and then to go on and specialise in an area that you want to specialise in. But you certainly would have to, do a sort of year or so of when you became a junior tenant of looking at more than one of the areas that you wanted to do. So if you wanted to specialise straight away, 39 probably isn't the place for you. Right, I'm going to come back to the other questions a bit later, and I'm now going to ask Chris and Ella to tell us how Second Six and Life as a Junior Member. I'm skipping to the next one. Life as a Junior Member. Chris, Ella, go for it.
Hi, I'm Ella. Myself and Chris are going to be, as Lindsay said, presenting this section. My route to the bar, I came basically straight through academia. I didn't do law as an undergrad. I did human sciences, which covered a lot more biology and demography and social sciences as well. I then realized that law is what I wanted to do. I did a law conversion course. I then did a master's in international law, and then I came straight to the bar. Fun fact, interesting thing about me, I just got a kitten, and it's all I can think about because I haven't slept for the past 2 weeks because he jumps on your feet when you move in the night. Kittens are really weird. Right.
What's it called, Ella?
Mowgli, like the kid out of Jungle Book, because he's a jungle child and completely nuts. Tiny little black kitten. Anyway, Chris and I are going to be talking about life as a junior member of Chambers and the transition from Second Six into being a junior tenant. I'll be talking about the kind of work that you do, how often you're in court, the advocacy experience that you get, and the training that you get. And then Chris is going to be talking about the culture in Chambers, our open door policy, support, mentorship, and the Chambers network and wellbeing more generally in that sense. So, as has already been mentioned by Samuel and by Monty, when you get to the second six of your pupillage, in other words, the second 6 months, you are what's known as on your feet, which means that you are able to appear in court as a barrister in your own cases. This is a brilliant opportunity. I really can't emphasize how fantastic it is to be on your feet as a pupil barrister.
Ella, do you think,
Hello.
so one of the questions is around what kind of cases do you do in the second six in court? So if you weren't going to be mentioning that, do you think you could incorporate that in?
Of course.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So you predominantly do what are called small claims for people who have done the bar course. For those who haven't done the bar course, that basically means smaller value cases that often cover issues like road traffic accidents, small personal injury things, minor contractual disputes that are of a low financial value or aren't too complicated. What that means functionally is that you are given a case that has been prepared by your solicitors, you have a bundle of papers, and you prepare your own advocacy in court, and then you are shipped off to courts across the country, county courts across the country, Manchester, Leeds, Wigan, all around London, Portsmouth, everywhere. And you are running the case yourself. You're cross-examining witnesses, you're making submissions. You end up dealing with the full gamut of procedural issues that small county claims throw at you, how to deal with strikeout applications, how to deal with witnesses not turning up or not having the correct translated witness statement from their own language. It's brilliant training because what it means is that you get to really practice your own advocacy and practice your own skills in cases that are of a level that you can tackle quite easily. Before that starts, you have in-house advocacy training in Chambers, which means that before you ever get to your feet in a county court, you've had the opportunity to practice in a safe environment in Chambers with your co-pupils and with your supervisors. And that is extremely valuable training because what it means is that you can try your hand and fail in a way that has no consequences. It's not assessed, it's not part of your tenancy decision, it's just safe training to get you feeling confident so that when you get to your feet in court, you know what you're doing and you are not going in feeling too uncertain. During your second six, while you're on your feet, you are normally in court on your own cases once a week in combination with your supervised work that happens around that. Once you are a tenant, you are continuing those small claims and you are also combining that often with lead work. So you'll be having the opportunity to be a junior on bigger cases. There's no set ratio as to how much that happens. I've been on cases where I'm the only junior to a more senior member of Chambers. I've been on bigger cases where I'm like the fourth junior on some massive hearing. It's a real mixed bag. And that combination is fabulous because what it means is that you're learning from the best, you're seeing the most seasoned senior silks doing amazing advocacy, and you are getting to be an advocate yourself. Comparing my experience of having that combination to the experiences of friends and colleagues of mine at other sets, if you're at a huge set where you are only a junior, you never get your own advocacy experience. If you're at a set where you're only on your own 2 feet, you don't get to see advocacy from more senior barristers. Having that combination of being able to be a junior on big cases and being able to have your own cases is fantastic, in my humble opinion.
And sometimes quite stressful, I think.
Yeah.
Spinning a lot of plates sometimes, but I think that is life at the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. It's totally true. You do learn to manage your own time. You have to learn to manage your own time in a really efficient way, and you have to learn how to keep 7 different plates spinning. When you transition into tenancy, you sit, as Lindsay mentioned, within the CLG, the Civil Liabilities Group, which means that you do predominantly cases that are personal injuries, small claims, clinical negligence things, but you also have the opportunity to take cases from the other practice areas. So I've already had some planning cases, some property cases, there's court of protection work, there's commercial cases that come in, and you do practice across all chambers areas when you are starting out. As you develop and progress as a tenant, you can narrow down what you are doing more, but at least at the stage that I'm still at, you practice really widely as a junior tenant. That sounds daunting, and it is daunting, don't get me wrong, because you're having to keep on top of several different practice areas, but it gives you the opportunity to develop in areas that you didn't necessarily think you'd be interested in. So for full transparency, sorry, Chris, when I came in, I didn't think I wanted to do commercial or construction work at all. I'm apologising to Chris because he was clocking me on those areas, but you develop in those areas and I found them really interesting, and it's now becoming a part of my practice that I'm really enjoying. So having to sit across a broad spectrum of areas is really useful. I think those are all the things I need to tell you about starting out as a junior tenant. Oh, final thing, as Sam has mentioned, you do get some in-house training on specific areas. So for example, a few weeks ago, there was training on the Court of Protection, because as a junior group, we felt that we hadn't really experienced enough training on Court of Protection work, and so it was organised for us in-house. It's more ad hoc than the training during pupillage, but it is definitely available and extremely helpful. I'll hand over to Chris.
Great,
Hi,
thanks, Ella.
So I did, as a contrast to what you've already heard, have a more traditional route to the bar, but as Sam said, that's by no means the usual route anymore. I studied law at UCL, did a mini pupillage at 39 at the start of my final year. I applied for pupillage in my final year at uni to 39 and a couple of other sets, got a place, did the bar course, started pupillage in 2021 and joined as a tenant in 2022. In terms of an interesting or fun fact, I was the singer in an indie rock band for about 6 years throughout school and before going to uni. That now manifests as a sort of dangerous willingness to go to karaoke, which several colleagues have witnessed or partaken in. Just to pick up on one thing that Ella
even more
mentioned.
dangerously, Chris, we if you don't know us, we have a karaoke bar in our basement. We have Lucky Voice in our basement, so it's very, very handy.
Which I've frequented several times, to put it mildly. To pick up on one thing that Ella's already spoken about in terms of advocacy as a junior, within lead work, there's also now increasing opportunities for oral advocacy in these sort of bigger hearings. So, for example, I was led by a more senior member of chamber in a big planning dispute at the start of last year, 2-day judicial review hearing in the High Court. I got to deal with about half of the grounds or so. Very luckily or happily, we won on one of the grounds that I argued, so that was very nice. But again, I think, contrast to friends at other sets, there's a really strong willingness from leaders to, you should have a go, and they'll support you to get on your feet, but it's the opportunity that's presented to you, which I was terrified by, but it went quite well, and I enjoyed it a lot. And picking up where Ella left off in terms of the training as you become a junior member of chambers, it's not formalized and it's not sort of a routine thing, but it's available almost on request if enough people are interested, or in specific practice areas, particularly ones you might not have done a tremendous amount of as a pupil. We've already heard about court of protection training. There was also a property training session for immediate juniors and people even more senior who were interested that I went along to last year. But the absence of the regular training that you have in pupillage doesn't mean an absence of support. And that's one thing that has already been touched on with the phrase of open door policy. But it's a really good thing about 39 is that if you have an issue, you can ask anyone. There is the literal open door in Chambers. You can go and knock on someone's door if they're not in a hearing or a call. They'll be very happy to answer your question. But it also sort of translates to an electronic open door in that there's WhatsApp groups for support. There's a special pupil queries chat for any issues that might arise during your second six, or sometimes after that. It's regularly used for queries about the civil procedure rules, for example. There's an All Chambers WhatsApp, there's a Juniors WhatsApp. Again, they're regularly used for assistance. You could email practice groups within Chambers, but there are also occasional All Chambers emails for truly novel issues. That's used by people from first day of junior tenant to silks who've been in practice for 20 years. There's a willingness across all lengths of Chambers to ask for help and to receive help if they need it. And what that means really is there's a very broad support network in Chambers, and a very nurturing atmosphere in that sense. And I think that ties into, I can obviously only speak about my perception of it, but my perception of the culture at 39. And in this respect, from even my mini back in 2019, it was abundantly apparent how friendly the set was. And I think given the size of the set, which Lindsay's already spoken about, how personal it can be and feels. I'm very lucky, or feel very lucky to be friends with a lot of members within Chambers. Everyone I've met has been a lovely person. It's also very much not stuffy. And I remember having a concern before starting pupillage of the particular concern was speaking to clerks and being called Sir or Mr. Moss. I think that's probably because I've watched too many episodes of Rumpole of the Bailey or something like that. But that's very much not the case. It's a very, very personal experience. And in terms of the friendliness which ties into the culture, I and many others very frequently go out for lunch or coffee with colleagues. We also take the pupils out for lunch. There's, as has already been discussed, social events in Chambers every week, along with big events like the Christmas parties, celebrations that might be related to milestones. For example, one of our members completed his PhD last year, and another celebrated having been a member of Chambers for a significant period, both of which were large Chambers parties. Everyone, including pupils, is invited, and it's another really brilliant opportunity to meet people across a broad set, but they're also thoroughly fun events. And sometimes, as Lindsay's already intimated, it involves a later trip to Lucky Voice, which is just underneath us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you very much, Ella. Okay, so now I'm going to ask two of our clerks to talk, two of our most senior clerks, Chris and Sheraton. Oh no, Joe and Sheraton. Sorry, I'm getting Chris. I can see you online, and I thought it was you now. And Sheraton and Joe are going to talk about how second six and early years are managed from a sort of clerking perspective. Over to you. Shez, we can't hear you. Always somebody. You passed on your audio on your test earlier. There you go.
I know that was
now.
the one thing I was thinking to myself a minute ago. Do not be that person. Apologies.
It makes us all feel better. So thank you very much.
Exactly. That's what I'm here for. Sorry, I'll start again. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm one of the directors of clerking in the public law team. I've actually been in Chambers in the clerking team for a whopping 24 years. In fact, actually this year, it's going to be my 25th year in October that I've been in Chambers. So setting aside the fact that obviously that makes me feel old, but from your perspective, it's obviously a good indicator of Chambers being a lovely place to work in. As Lindsay said,
and that we have huge experience.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not the only one that's been here for a long time as well. There's quite a lot of other people in the staff team and the clerking team that are not far behind me, shall we say, 6 months or so. As Lindsay said, Joe is going to be co-presenting this session, and he's one of the practice managers in the civil liability team and is an integral part of your pupillage experience. As we've already said, the agenda will cover what you can expect during your second six, and then the early years after, of course, you've completed your successful pupillage. But Joe's going to cover the first aspect for you, so I'll hand over to him now.
Thanks, Sheraton. Yeah, my name's Joe, and I've been clerking for over 10 years now. the last 2 of those years, I've been back at 39, so I actually left after I started my career. So, like Sheraton said, great place to work. Few of us actually come back. So, I clerk the civil liability group, and I also manage the pupils diary. So, as a pupil at 39 Essex Chambers, one of the benefits of being in such a large set like we are is that we try and get our pupils into court once or twice a week during their second six, which can be up to 30 cases in about sort of 6-month period. These cases will be undertaken by the second six people in their own right, which will have a huge advantage in terms of court experience and meeting some of Chambers' clients. We try to keep most of these hearings in a local county court, and that helps interact with local judges, ushers, opponents, and our solicitor clients. It's really important during this time and the rest of your career to build really good relationships with the judges and the ushers, as this can really impact the experience that you have at court. Well, going to court in these cases is a key chance to develop relationships with key Chambers clients and will be very beneficial for developing your future practice. Well, some of these hearings are likely to be held remotely, which is mainly a result of COVID. The court will decide if counsel needs to attend in person or remote, and will usually circulate the meeting links to the parties the day before. The hearings that you'll be instructed on will be low value and very straightforward, such as small claims, trips and slips, road traffic accidents, MOJ Stage 3 hearings, and court protection Section 21A matters. The second six pupils also get exposure to small contract disputes, which often come from the commercial and construction team, and also planning enforcement cases from the planning, environmental and property team. These hearings will be fairly disputed between all the pupils, which is subject to availability and the capacity, which works around other commitments. So, as the clerks, we will liaise with the pupil supervisors to make sure that the pupils will have sufficient time to balance their pupillage work, any other caseload, and these hearings to make sure that she can prepare and attend the hearings and they're fully ready for court. Another benefit of being able to attend your own hearings is that alongside the pupillage award, you'll get to keep the fees that you earn on these cases. So I know going to court can seem quite daunting, but in the first 6 months, there'll be an amazing and thorough training program to get you ready for your first court appearance. These would include training sessions on specific topics across Chambers' key areas and mock trials, which will be linked to the cases that you'll be undertaking. This provides hints and tips and different things that you might need to help you get ready for your court appearance. So, as already mentioned, pupillage isn't always about just hard work. We do try and arrange as many socials, events with the pupils and clerks and other members of Chambers to help us get to know you better. There are lots of events in Chambers all through the year, which the pupils will be invited to, and it will help you build the relationship between you, the clerks, and other members of Chambers. And in my opinion, and I'm sure Sheraton will agree as well, the key to an effective pupillage is having excellent and open communication with the clerks and supervisors. We are really here to help and support and help you to just succeed through to a tenancy. The clerks room is a very open and friendly space, and we're always here to assist with any issues or just a general catch up. So that's everything I have to say on what you can expect during your second six, and I'll pass you over to Sheraton, who's going to speak on the early years after tenancy.
Thanks, Joe.
I'd interrupt us to say that our all of our staff all sit together. We have 5 floors in our building on Chancery Lane, and we're on the 4th floor. And we go from one end of the building to the other end of the building. We're all open plan. We've actually got 50 staff, so quite a lot of us in. And I think it's quite a good space. I think it has quite a good feel. It has a huge amount of experience in there, and we do really encourage pupils and junior tenants to come and see us every single day and tell us their highs and their lows, and share with us what they're going through. And we even used to have a desk there that they could come and sit on if they got bored in wherever else they were or just needed a break. And I think we should put that back in again. Anyway, back to you, Shez.
Thank you. Okay, so you've been taken on as a tenant. Well done, you. As we've mentioned earlier on in some of the other talks, the mentoring and support will continue. You will still have the same buddy that you had from pupillage, who, as we've said, was a junior tenant. They've recently been through the early stages, which you'll now be going through yourselves. There'll be lots of guidance and reassurance should that be needed. You'll continue to be instructed on the matters that Joe's already set out just a moment ago, but you will now, as a tenant, have a much wider range of the opportunities that we have here, expanding into the breadth of practice areas we have here at 39. So some of the examples that you could expect would be mini secondments. We do lots of these, and they can be domestic and also international opportunities. These are really, really excellent ways for the junior bar to get to know the client, how they work, how the sector works, gather knowledge on that particular area of law, and of course then you start to build those all-important relationship with clients, progress, and then obviously transfer that into work. We offer these arrangements with a variety of different clients and sectors. Examples are local authorities, so from that aspect you could be covering public, commercial and planning issues. We also have a massive regulatory team in Chambers, which means we've got lots of different regulators that we work with. We have regular secondments at the moment that have been running for many years with the Financial Ombudsman Service, Ofgem and the Office for Students. Others that we've worked with over the years has been the Electoral Commission, FCA, the Civil Aviation Authority, the SRA, the Bank of England, and also we go into send juniors into law firms to help our clients, ad hoc on big projects that they'd be working on.
And that's both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, also from sanctions is something that's a growing area for us at the moment. And we've been approached recently, and there's talks with the Foreign Commonwealth Office and also OFSI, the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. As we mentioned, Lindsay just said as well, we do the international secondments. We've had in the past a rolling secondment taking place in Singapore with a law firm out there. And actually in December, I was contacted by one of our real key clients that worked with lots of different practice areas in Chambers with an opportunity in Bahrain and also Dubai. So they give you, a good example of there's loads of opportunities. As has also been touched on earlier on in some of the talks, one of the highlights of coming to 39 in those early years is the chance to work with some of the most preeminent silk and senior juniors in the bar, getting exposure to being involved in high profile, interesting and important cases that we have here. We often have to build large team in Chambers from the junior end, and good examples of these are in the public inquiry arena. We had big teams working on Grenfell and the infected blood inquiry, and we now have several different teams acting on COVID, Post Office, Lampard and the Thirlwell inquiries. Another thing to mention is the GLD panel, Government Legal Department. We've got 24 members presently on that. You can't apply to be onto the C panel until you are at least 3 years call, but in the early years, you can join their junior scheme, which we will arrange for you. It's very easy to do, which means that members of Chambers can bring you in to assist them in their cases, or GLD will call the clerks, ask for people that are on the scheme to help with disclosure tasks, drafting pleadings in a range of different practice areas. That's another great opportunity. And that's also an opportunity to not just work with people in Chambers, you get a chance to work with people who are on the panel outside of Chambers as well. So you're building up your network. As your practice is developing, the clerks will sit down with you to have practice review meetings, ideally every 6 months, but we look at how things are going, areas you wish to develop, general aspirations, and anything we can help you with, or any concerns you have. Obviously we have ad hoc chats all the time when people come into the clerk's room, but these will be sort of more formulated chats that we could have to help you carry you forward into your career at the bar. There's lots of opportunities on the business development side of things. 39 put on a huge seminar program across the core practice groups, which we host upstairs in Chambers, and the juniors are actively encouraged to attend the talks. We follow on with drinks where you get the chance to mingle with clients and the members. This also sits alongside our huge webinar program, and juniors again are encouraged to either speak or give assistance on writing papers, which you would get the credit for, and any input is something that you could add to your Chambers online website profile. As we've touched on previously as well, we are a large set of Chambers, so it's really important, and Chambers culture, to make sure there's lots of opportunities to socialise together. In term time, we have Chambers lunch, where members of Chambers very kindly host and pay for lunch, which I think now happens on a monthly basis. We eat upstairs in one of the conference rooms. That's a really nice opportunity to catch up with people across all different practice areas. We also alternate drinks every Thursday and Friday at 5 p.m. in the clerk's room, and that's regardless as if it's term time or not. I think I've covered the most useful information that we can pass on to you at this stage. I hope that's helpful. I think the main thing I would say now is we do really appreciate how daunting the pupillage experience can be for some, but Chambers really are excellent supporting you at all levels. As has been said, we've got a huge clerking team, huge support staff, and the barristers are pretty good too. So it's a really nurturing environment for you to progress at the bar. And honestly, I don't think you will experience practice diversity like this at any other set, which again was something that was said at the very beginning, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
And Shez, it's every 2 weeks we have lunch now.
Oh,
and
is
the
it 2
next
weeks?
one,
Sorry.
it's going to be Chinese New Year. So we're going to welcome in the year of the snake with a Chinese lunch, which I'm very much looking forward to. Okay, so thank you very much, Cheriton and Joe. That was great. And now we're going to look at what 39 Essex Chambers is like as a place to work. And Nicola, who is one of our pupillage supervisors and is on our pupillage committee, is going to be talking to us, as is Chris, who is one of our clerks. And so I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
I think Chris is actually going to go first. So over to you, Chris, to talk about Chambers bricks and mortar.
Thank you, Nicola. So my name's Chris. I'm the Senior Practice Manager of the ADR team in Chambers. Work primarily with the commercial construction team, but our ADR group covers all areas of Chambers practice, from course protection work to personal injury cases and the planning environmental team. So briefly, in respect of Chambers facilities, we moved in 2015 to a very modern building, unlike a lot of Chambers on Chancery Lane. So in doing so, we gave ourselves a building that was fully accessible and very modern, kitted out with a lot of new technology. So over the last few years, that's been extremely instrumental in helping members attend hearings remotely. We have 10 custom-built conference rooms upstairs, which are all fully kitted out with screens, cameras, microphones, and all the like. And they're also utilized for holding seminars and webinars. They open up into one big room as well, which allows us to host seminars on a much larger scale. In addition to that, we have fantastic IT support in Chambers. So we have a full team on site who will provide any starting pupil with the same standard kit as members are provided. So a laptop, a phone, 2 screens, and a sit-stand desk, so they can set up their configuration however they please. And in addition to that, the IT team will be on hand to assist with any difficulties you have accessing the Chambers system remotely or in Chambers, or when you're in court. If anything is needed on the go, they're there to help you. From day one as well, as a pupil, you're given access to Chambers file management system, which is a Citrix file system, so you can access your documents wherever you like, as long as you're connected to the Chambers VPNs, and also the Chambers case management system. And the clerks engage with the pupils very early on to ensure that they know how to use this, read their diary on there, add their times, so it's a very smooth transition when they do start going into their practicing sixth and onto tenancy. In addition to being in a modern building, this also comes with access to secure cycle facilities, showers, lockers to encourage active lifestyles and routes into work. And in addition, we have a green roof, which has 82 solar panels that contribute to the Chambers electricity bills being lowered, but also reducing our environmental impact alongside having reusable, green certified cleaning products. And we also aim to recycle as much as we can.
I'm laughing, Chris, because we do have solar panels on the roof, but we have a constant battle with seagulls who want to drop rocks on them. I don't know what it is about the seagulls and rocks and the solar panels, but it's a constant battle with seagulls, rocks, netting, the whole thing. Not as easy as it would seem to be green sometimes. Sorry.
Thank you. Learn something new every day. If anyone has any tips on how to keep seagulls away, please do put them in the Q&A as well. Yeah. The one final thing that I wanted to raise was our Chambers access to the legal libraries, both internally and online. These can be got from day one as well from pupils, so the likes of LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, And internally, we also have a wide array of legal textbooks, law reports that are all accessible to pupils as well. Just to round off before passing over to Nicola, as part of our encouragement of a good work-life balance and well-being, Chambers does also have a games area, which includes a pool table, darts board, table tennis, and some very comfortable seating for when you do want to unwind and relax a bit with other members of Chambers, your co-pupils, or the staff, and have a catch-up a bit more informally.
Although you would not believe how competitive that table tennis table can become. Thanks, Chris.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Conn. I am a junior member of Chambers. I practice in public law and in the Court of Protection. I came to the bar very late, I think probably even later than Vikram. I mean, not in terms of geography, but in terms of time spent doing something else. I read English at university first, and then I did a master's in international relations. And my interesting fact is that I had a paid internship at NATO set up, which I jacked in because I was then offered a news traineeship at the BBC. So I went off and became a reporter and producer for BBC South, covering the foot and mouth crisis rather than doing the UN invasion of Afghanistan or something, I think it would have been. So that was the path untraveled for me. And I worked at the BBC for a long time, for over a decade. I worked at BBC South and then up to Network to work for the Politics Show and then Newsnight and the Today programme. And then I left the BBC and I did the GDL with a baby and a toddler in tow. And I think it's important to say that because I think it's important that we talk about these things as a Chambers and how welcoming and important we understand that people's lives are outside of the bar, because obviously it's very important to us that we're the very best barristers and clerks that we can be, but also that we are positive, supportive and kind human beings, and we recognise that people have caring responsibilities outside the home, either to their parents, to other contacts or to their children. And to that end, we have generous maternity, paternity and adoption policies, and we take all of these things very seriously. And we have, I think the highest number of female cases at the bar. We have a very high number of very senior women in Chambers, and I think a very diverse, and I hope that everyone feels an equal and supportive and diverse Chambers. And I think that's really important to all of us, and I hope it's important to everybody listening. In terms of the experience that you have when you join Chambers, you've heard a lot about people talking about, you know, the small claims and the low value claims and things that you do when you first become a tenant. But I thought it'd be interesting to also share that one of my first experiences was a pro bono case that Sheraton, who you've heard from, our brilliant clerk, came in and she said, "Oh, Nicola, I've met this guy at a conference and he's got this case and he can't get a barrister for it and it's up in North Tees, but do you think you could do it?" And I went up to, it was North Shields Court, my first ever JR, and it was a JR of the same roof rule, which was a rule which said that before 1st of October 1979, you couldn't recover criminal injury compensation if you shared the same roof with your assailant, which obviously meant if you were a victim of sexual abuse and it was a parental abuser, you couldn't claim. And people had been trying to overturn it for 30 years. And we did it. And I have to say, it was my proudest moment at the bar. It probably still is, but it was because Sheraton, our brilliant clerk, had met this guy at a conference. And that's the kind of Chambers that we have, because we have this depth and, you know, breadth of work, that you can meet a random, you know, it's almost like meeting a guy down the pub who's like, "I've got this case, it's a bit weird." And it was quite weird when we, you know, we finesse some of the grounds, but then that becomes a really important, you know, moment in the law. Anyway, in terms of well-being in Chambers, you know, we have these important maternity, paternity adoption policies. We also have, you know, rigorous equality and EDI policies, and all of these are carefully policed in Chambers. We have anti-bullying policies in place. You've heard already from Chris and Sam about our buddying schemes, about our mentoring, and I hope that all the pupils in Chambers feel empowered and supported throughout the process and in the early years of tenancy. I'm one of the pupil supervisors, and I think we all take it really seriously how, you know, the trust that people put in us when they come and agree to be trained in Chambers. And to that end, we also have mental health champions in Chambers. We have mental health first aiders. We have a dedicated pastoral officer, Kate Grange, KC, and all our practice managers within the clerks room, including Chris Jones, who you've heard from, are trained in mental health awareness. I think Chris is a mental health champion. They all have an understanding of this, you know, and it's important. The bar is a difficult job. It's a brilliant job, but it's a difficult one. And sometimes we all might need help and support, and we as the Chambers take that seriously and provide it. You've already heard that we have an open door policy. We have lots of great lunches together. And I think broadly, it's a brilliant place to work, and we would love for you to come and join us. And I'll be around to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thanks, Nicola. That's great. It'd be great if you can stay on, because as a pupil supervisor, it'd be really good if you could join in on this next session, which is Rachel and Ned, who are going to talk to us about what 39 Essex Chambers pupil supervisors are looking for from their pupils. And we are then going to finish with how to apply to 39 Essex Chambers, and we're going to run through all, you know, some of the people on the pupillage committee, somebody from the mini pupillage committee, and the pupil supervisors that are on are going to talk about the process and applying, and, you know, common mistakes and that kind of thing. So that's how we're going to end it. And then if there's any Q&As, I'll sweep those up at the end. But Rachel and Ned, if you could kick us off with, you know, what supervisors are looking for from their pupils at 39, which will be much the same, I would imagine, as what pupil supervisors are looking for in most sets.
I mean, you'd hope so. TBD. If you hear otherwise, let us know in the chat function. I'm Rachel. I'm a junior tenant at Chambers, and I'm one of the public law supervisors this year. So is Nicola, who you've just heard from. I do predominantly public law, obviously. Within that, I do quite a lot of government work. On the Attorney General's panel. I do quite a lot of public inquiry work. I do quite a lot of court of protection work. And I'm having a very busy first week back at work this week after Christmas. And
how did you get to the bar, Rachel, and what's your one interesting fact?
My one interesting fact is that I had a really similar pro bono experience to Nicola, except not as important in terms of what it established. But I was floating around in my first year, and Vikram, who you've seen earlier, came bouncing along the corridor going, I just need somebody, I've just been in court and there's a serious medical treatment case, which is withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. This chap just needs someone to go along and ask for adjournment. You can do that, can't you? And I was like, yeah, I can probably, you know, stand up and say he needs a bit more time to instruct somebody who's actually competent and not me. Anyway, the judge refused the application for the adjournment, and we had to just go ahead. So from that, I learned never say yes to anything Vikram offers. But it was really a great experience, and it was really important for this guy whose baby was the subject of proceedings. He wasn't really involved in its care, but he wanted to make sure that, you know, his partner, who herself was incapacitated, had someone putting her voice across. And so it was just an incredible experience to be part of, although very nerve-wracking. I'm still dealing with the trauma some years later. And how did I get to the bar? I kind of in the middle of the routes that people have described. I didn't do law at university. I did English, then I did a master's, then I was about to start a PhD and realised I really had no actual interest in what I was going to be spending the next 3 years of my life doing. So I decided I'd try law instead, and I ended up at 39. He rejected me from mini pupillage, but accepted me for pupillage. So there you go. Don't be too disheartened. I think there are all sorts of setbacks on the way to the bar, and you just have to keep going. We know that. Ned, shall I hand over to you to introduce yourself?
Thanks very much. So I'm Ned Helm. I'm one of the PEP, so that's Planning, Environment and Property Supervisors, the other one being Daniel Stedman Jones. And I've been a supervisor for a few years now, and I thoroughly enjoy it, I have to say. I've had a slightly convoluted, perhaps, journey to the bar. I started off as a biologist at university, just as an undergraduate level. I loved it. I thought quite seriously about sticking in science as a career, but in the end, I thought that that law would suit me better, and I think that's certainly right. Although there is part of me, perhaps a small part of me, that thinks that being a paleontologist, in addition to being a barrister, would be fun. And I suppose that's my interesting fact. If it is an interesting fact, I'm a middle-aged dino nut.
I did not know that. That's an amazing fact.
But anyway, so but after I didn't become a paleontologist, I took a year out and I was living in the countryside, and I looked at local employers that might be law related, and the closest ones were prisons, and so I worked in a couple of prisons, and that was fascinating and very valuable to me as an experience, but it did not then convinced me that I wanted to be a criminal lawyer, and so I tilted more towards public law and environmental and planning law. I then did a law conversion course, and I then went to what was then the Bar Pro Bono unit, which is a wonderful charity, now part of Advocate, and became a caseworker there for a couple of years. And I then did pupillage at 45 Grayson Square, and I came to 39 in 2013. And I found it a lovely place to be, I have to say. It's got excellent work, it's got excellent facilities, but more importantly than that, it is a very friendly and supportive, nurturing place. And that's not true of all sets of chambers. In terms of my practice, so I listened to Vikram earlier. I'm much more specialized than Vikram is, and I find his breadth of practice slightly alarming. I do mostly planning and environmental law, which are quite broad enough for me. I do bits and pieces of other things as well, but it's mostly planning and environmental law, and I thoroughly enjoy it, I have to say. I'd also quite like to say just briefly that I'm also a member of the Free Bar Network, which is a charity aiming to promote LGBTQ+ equality and inclusion at the bar. And if I might give a bit of a plug for them, they've got an online event on pupillage as an LGBTQ+ candidate this coming Monday at 6:30. You can find details on their website if you'd be interested in that. So that's me. In terms of what we're looking for, Rachel, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? We should have planned this.
Yeah, it's not my fault.
No. But shall I kick off?
You go first, and I'll.
Okay. So, in terms of what we're looking for, I mean, obviously we're looking for people who are going to be good barristers, but there are multiple ways of being a good barrister. Some people will like trial advocacy, some people will like appellate advocacy, some people will like advisory work, some people will like a more academic practice. So there are lots of ways of doing it, and therefore lots of different types of people who will be good at it. But there are some skills that everyone needs, and so we look for those in particular. And we when we're doing our assessments, we look at sort of core skills. So intellectual ability is obviously very important, expressive ability, both orally and in writing, but also interpersonal skills, commitment, drive, and efficiency, and interest in relevant areas of law. And we assess those over the course of the year. You're certainly not expected to know everything, or indeed very much on day one. You're not expected to know everything at the end of pupillage. It's a difficult career, and so you continue to learn throughout it. And certainly in the PEP seat, most pupils know nothing at all about planning law other than a few headlines they've seen when they start off, and they pick it up as they go along, and that's absolutely fine. So you don't need to come with a huge amount of knowledge, but you do need to come with an inquisitive attitude and a desire to learn, and we'll help you with that. So always ask questions if there are things you don't understand. You've heard about the sort of the working pattern in pupillage. And we're looking for people, obviously, who are going to work hard, but during the working day. So it is a 9 to 6. We're not wanting people to work outside those periods. And working sensibly and maintaining a hinterland is very important to succeed at the bar, but also to be a happy person. One thing I suppose is that the bar is much more collaborative and team-based than I thought it would be when I came to it. And so you'll meet lots of people, and getting on with a range of different people is important. But it's not to say you have to be extroverted to be a barrister. There are plenty of introverts at the bar. I'm one of them, I think. So don't feel you have to be the showman if you're not. It's important to be yourself. But it is important that you try to get on with a range of different people, because you will be working in teams quite a bit. Just one thing earlier on the on our approach in terms of taking people on. I think Lindsay said at the beginning that we've taken on 10 of the last 11 pupils that we've had, and on the 11th one, he was taken on as a probationary tenant at another set afterwards. And if people are not taken on, we do our best to help them to go elsewhere. But in terms of the sort of high rate of pupils being taken on, that's a nice feature about 39, I think, because it means that you're not in competition with your co-pupils, and they're therefore friends and colleagues, and they can help to nurture you as you go forward. In terms of what we expect in terms of the quality of your work, there's obviously expected to be an arc as you go through pupillage. So you have 4 seats. In your first seat, we will obviously not expect you to be as good as we expect you to be in your 4th seat. And so we'll nurture you through your pupillage and expect you to get better, and you will get better. People always do. But sometimes people will have a bad seat, or sometimes more than one bad seat. That sort of thing happens, but the assessment that we make is in the round based on everything we've seen in pupillage.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on what you said about, not expecting, don't feel that you've got to be an extrovert or fit into a particular mold. We're not looking for a particular type of person. We just want you to be the best barrister that you can be. And pupillage, the point of pupillage is to get you to that stage. We are, as supervisors, we are there to judge you in the sense of provide feedback on your work, help you to improve, point out, give constructive criticism, but we're not there to judge you in the sense of as a person. We just want you to be as happy as you can be. And I feel very strongly that pupillage should not be any more miserable than it has to be as a year. It's quite hard enough doing a year-long job interview in effect without your supervisors adding extra pressure. I think we are, I'd like to think we are anyway, quite human, and we understand that people will make mistakes, and it is a process of learning. I mean, I still regularly make mistakes. Unfortunately, have some very understanding solicitors. It is, no one knows everything. It would be oddly intellectually arrogant if you thought you did. And it would probably be professionally negligent that, pupillage is setting you up for life at the bar, where you will have to keep checking things. You will have to get on with a range of people, and it's a continuous journey. And I think we try to set you up in good stead for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we also, one of the nice things is you spend quite a lot of time with your pupil supervisors, so they get to know you quite well, you get to know them, and you can keep coming back to chat to them as you go through early tenancy. And people do, and that's really nice.
Yeah, I've actually had a phone call from one of my pupil supervisors whilst we've been on this webinar. Had to quickly send a text saying, I'll do the pupillage webinar, but there's a real culture in Chambers of people being there to support each other, and that tracks through into pupillage.
I think those might be a few things that I might add in around sort of competencies that you might be looking for. So I hope you don't mind, unless, were you going to go on to that?
I was just checking my list to see what we haven't covered off already. I think Ned did the sort of core criteria that we look for, but we haven't spoken about things like, you know, resilience, diligence, tenacity.
I think it's worth saying, because I think it is it's a bizarre year, isn't it, and a difficult year, and it's not really replicated in any other kind of industry, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think in terms of those kind of key characteristics that will help you to get through, the ability to learn from your mistakes, the ability to say when you're finding things difficult and ask for help, but make sure, you know, ask questions, be intellectually curious and inquisitive, as Ned said. Obviously, there is an element of picking your moment. Nobody has ever done this to me, but it would be unhelpful to ask in the middle of a conference for clarification about something, you know, save it till the end of the discussion and ask then. But everyone I've ever met has had that sort of judgment, and I'm sure everyone on this call does too. It you know, can be quite a difficult year, so you do need to have a certain level of resilience, and we've spoken about what Chambers has in place to try and ensure that people do keep that sort of hinterland and manage to keep their lives, stay in touch with your friends, not working all the time. That is really important. The flip side of that is that you do need to be organised, you do need to be diligent, because you've only got between 9 and 6 on Monday to Friday to finish off all the work that we give you. So time management skills are really important and will stand you in good stead in practice, where you will invariably be dealing with competing demands from different people, and you need to be able to meet those deadlines and also manage clients and expectations. Ned, are there any that you want to?
I think that's covered it pretty comprehensively, I think. I mean, in terms of the Lindsay was talking about the competencies, and I talked about the sort of the main headers that we deal with in our feedback sessions. They're drawn from the Bar Standards Board's professional statement, which people who are particularly interested can read. There's a lot of stuff on the BSB website. It's not always that easy to get your head around it, but the professional statement is a contained document and perhaps worth having a read of. But I think the sort of the main competencies are the ones that you would expect, really. You do need to have a high level of a particular kind of intellectual ability. And you do obviously need to have expressive abilities, both orally and in writing, and both are important. And beyond those other things as well, but perhaps they're the most important, although Lindsay is giving me a look, or maybe not giving me a look. I don't.
No, not at all.
Getting on with
I was actually looking at my watch to see where we were on time.
Oh, I see.
So
yeah.
I think I'm going to draw that to a close, if that's okay. Thank you very much, Ned and Rachel. And the bit that actually I think people are really, really interested in. So the rest of all of this has given you, I hope, a flavour of Chambers generally, 39 in particular, who we are, you know, what we do, a little bit about our building, and, you know, all the and the staff and the members, and, you know, the supervisors and the kind of people that you would meet. But this is what you're really interested in, right? Which is how to apply to 39 Essex Chambers and all other chambers that you're applying for in this Pupillage Gateway process that's open at the moment. And I think that Colin might be stuck in court. Colin is the head of our Pupillage committee, but we have David Hopkins, and we have Jake, and we have Nicola and Rachel and Ned, and lots of people on our Pupillage committee. So I don't know who is going to take the lead, but I think it might have been you, David, yeah?
Well, I'll introduce myself. Jake and I are going to talk for about 20 minutes on various points around applying to 39 Essex Chambers and other chambers. I'll do the introduction, but I'll hand over to Jake straight away in terms of then allowing him to introduce himself and talk about the process and what we're looking for. So
right,
I'm David Hopkins. I'll give you my route to the bar first. I studied PPE at York, then did an MPhil in economics at Oxford. And I went into the city where I structured derivatives for 5 years. So I'm also a career changer. I studied part-time and then began pupillage here now almost 10 years ago, which is slightly shocking to me. And since then, since becoming a tenant, I've specialised in financial services, unsurprisingly, but as well construction, commercial and regulatory law. An interesting fact, around about 20 years ago now, BBC Two broadcast footage of me saying the word penises to Jeremy Paxman. Unfortunately, it was not the correct answer on University Challenge and we got knocked out, but it wasn't just because of that. And I'll now hand over to Jake.
Oh wow! What a thing!
Beat that, Jake.
Yeah. I was going to say. Hi everyone. I'm Jake. I'm one of the junior tenants at 39. My route to the bar. I went to a state school. Then did history at Cambridge. Went away for a bit. I worked in think tanks, but then in my late 20s, decided to do the law conversion course and went down that route and was lucky to have to get pupillage at 39. Essex. Interesting fact about me is I live on a boat, which is where I am right now, desperately trying to keep it warm, just about succeeding. But yeah, so hopefully it's going to be -5 tonight, so fingers crossed. I think so we're going to talk about the how to apply to 39 Essex. I'm going to kick us off with the process and what we're looking for. I imagine everyone on this call knows a bit about the process, but we're on the pupillage gateway. That closes on the 6th of February. Do not miss that deadline, obviously. I think the gateway is already live, so you can go on and see the questions that we're asking. Some will be similar to other chambers, and then we've got some. We usually have one that's more specific to us. We then have 2 rounds of interviews. The dates for those interviews are already on our website, so that's worth looking at on our pupillage page. I think that David might touch on a little bit more, so I'll move on to what we're looking for. I know that Ned, I think, ran through these already, but we've got 5 criteria that we apply, and we apply the same criteria at the written stage when we're deciding who to interview, at the interview stage, and then, as Ned says, in pupillage. So they're really consistent throughout, and those 5 criteria are, just to repeat them: intellectual ability, expressive ability, and that's both written and oral, interpersonal skills, commitment, resilience, and efficiency, and then interests in one or more areas of law in which Chamber specialises, and that's all on our pupillage page. And I can't stress that when we're looking at written applications and in interviews, you get a score on each of those 5 criteria, and that is it. There's nothing else. There's no sort of hidden criteria that we're applying. So when you're doing your applications, you need to be thinking about how you're going to hit all of those areas, and I think that's probably the key thing to take away. More broadly, in terms of what we're looking for, we're obviously not looking for the finished article at the point of applying for pupillage. The whole process is a learning process, so we don't expect you to have done everything under the sun before coming. And I know a lot of our junior tenants, myself included, applied during the GDL, so very early on in our legal training. I think that probably covers off the first bullet point, Lindsay, unless you've got anything else you want me to cover.
No, I think that's great. So, David, are you taking the next one?
Yes, I am. Yeah. So Jake and I are doing a little swap back and forth between the various bullet points. And I'm covering how to apply, what should be in your application, and how to make your application stand out. Just following up on the point around pupillage gateway, we, as Jake mentioned, are on gateway. All pupillages must be advertised on the gateway, even if chambers use their own application process outside the gateway. So just in terms of other chambers you might be looking at, you might see some chambers which use their own forms and so on, but there should be instructions on the gateway as to how to access those. But when it comes to the point of actually filling out that application, what do you put in it? How do you make it stand out? First one, and it's a very easy one, answer the questions. There are, unfortunately, application forms I've seen, I'm sure no one on this call will do one, but where someone doesn't really answer the question. They answer a slightly different question. Maybe they've left it a bit too generic and so on. I'll come on to the pitfalls of generic applications. But the next is really, remember your form is going to be read and assessed by barristers. We absolutely love evidence. So don't just tell us that you'd be a good barrister because you're highly intelligent, you're self-motivated, and you're a great public speaker. Give us the evidence. When you've told us about your qualities, follow up straight away with examples. Academic prizes you've won, or projects you've started yourself and run, or examples of your advocacy experience, or other types of speaking experience. You might come across what's known as the STAR, S-T-A-R model, situation, task, action, result. If you use those 4 points, they're an excellent way of thinking about how to make sure that you structure your answer so you explain the evidence which supports what you're telling us. Might be difficult, admittedly, with the strict word limits in the gateway forms to always include all 4 points, situation, task, action, result. But if you're thinking like that, you will be giving answers where you tell us something, but then you also give us the evidence which supports it. And that will be far more persuasive than people who make applications simply telling us that they're brilliant. They might be, but as a barrister, I'll read that form and think, I don't see any evidence of that, and won't mark it nearly as highly as someone who tells me it, but also gives me examples to support that. Something else which is probably a little bit less obvious when you're at the stage of applying rather than on the other side. Something I think certainly we look for, and I'm sure all other chambers look for, is that we want our applicants to know what a career at the bar means and what being a barrister involves. The reason we look for that is because, as Vikram and Lindsay mentioned earlier, we take on most of our pupils as tenants. And once you're a tenant, it's very hard to kick you out. Now, I'm not sure what the exact percentage is, but I think you need to get voted out here by 95% plus of tenants, which, I mean, that's, unless you've done something really terrible, never going to happen. So getting through the pupillage process and getting a pupillage is nigh on. It's the last time we're getting to really check that this person wants to be a barrister for the right reasons, knows what it's going to entail. And actually, frankly, you need to be able to show that by, this is why mini pupillages, and Jake will come on to them, but why they are a valuable part of the application process, because there are plenty of people, I'm sure, who have studied law or done a conversion course, etc., and they like the concept of law in general, but perhaps aren't entirely suited to being barristers. The self-employment aspect of it, the busy case load, etc., etc., etc. So do try to show in your form and your application the evidence which shows that you do know what being a barrister entails, and it's not the same as being a associate at a large law firm, for example. There was a question earlier, what is the best way to evidence an interest in chambers practice areas if you don't have any relevant experience? The first obvious one, assuming relevant experience means work experience, would be academic. You might have chosen, presumably you would have chosen, if you've got an interest, particular modules at your conversion course or in your law degree, which show that you're interested in that area. You might not have had an opportunity to pick those types of modules. Something I did, and it's a tip I often pass on to candidates in my application forms, was I looked at Chambers websites and then I went on to Bailey or Westlaw or whatever I could get hold of, and I picked one or two sometimes, but usually one, high profile cases that their members had been involved in. I'd mention on the application form and say, oh, I'd really love to see that. In fact, actually, I'll tell you, it was Jenny Richards was involved in Cheshire West. Jenny Richards QC, as she then was, now KC, and that was the case that I mentioned on my 39 Essex form. Of course, make sure you do actually read the judgment and know the case. It did get brought up in my first interview, and I was thankfully able, because I had revised it the night before and so on, to talk about some of the points which arose in that case. Also, if you've got skills which are useful in a particular practice area, mention them, obviously, again, with examples. I had a background in finance, so it was easy for me to say I'm interested in financial services law. Lindsay mentioned a colleague of mine who was an engineer previously, and he can show, obviously, an interest in construction law. Or you might have, say, negotiation skills, which would be useful in areas of law which involve a lot of negotiation discussions and settlement, for example, Clin Neg. Finally, what to avoid. Jake's going to come on to common mistakes and omissions. I'll limit myself to just saying, make sure you tailor your application to the specific chambers you're applying to. Avoid generic applications. Now, we know you've got loads of applications to do, but it's a little bit like having to date 12 different chambers all at once. Each chambers wants you to be completely obsessed with that chambers and look like that's the only one for them, even if they know secretly you've got 11 other chambers on the go as well. You'll never score highly if your application talks about an area of work we don't do. I'm sure I've read some applications for 39 Essex which talks how much the applicant liked doing bail applications and things like that, and as Lindsay mentioned, that's one of the few things we don't do, criminal work. Even worse, don't get our name wrong, and I have seen that a few times, but make sure you tailor, obsessively research the chambers that you're applying to, and make sure you have made an application to them which shows why they're the chambers for you. And with that, I'll hand back to Jake for common mistakes.
Thanks, David. David's stolen some of my lines there, but I've got a few more to add. So I'm going to discuss common mistakes and omissions, and then do's and don'ts. And a good hint for what's going to come, I'm going to structure my answer in looking at written first, and then I'm going to come on to the interview process. So the written application, as David has touched on, research is essential. You really want to show that you know what we're about. Definitely agree with David that looking into some high profile cases that we've done shows that you really know what this Chambers is about. And absolutely, don't focus on an area of law that isn't one of our areas of law, or is a kind of relatively small area of law that we do. That's a pretty telltale sign. Written answers structure is really essential. A piece of advice that I always think is good about the application is that it is a piece of advocacy. At the end of the day, you are trying to sell yourself to chambers. So as David says, making sure that you're telling in every paragraph, you're telling the reader right at the beginning in the first sentence what the paragraph is about, and then you're backing it up with evidence. I'm conscious this is something that people maybe give different advice on, but in my view, when I'm reading applications and I see bullet points, I think, great, this is easy for me to read, this is easy for me to digest. So I certainly wouldn't think there's any rule against that. If used appropriately, in some bits it may not be appropriate, but in some bits it really is. Using paragraphs, there's nothing worse than opening up an application, to be honest, and seeing just massive blocks of text. They're going to be really hard to read. Split it up on the page, make it easy for us to quickly go through. I mean, going back to what I just said, we've got those 5 criteria. If what I do is I've got the 5 criteria and I'm going through marking with a pen where I feel that the criteria have been met, and I want to be able to do that really quite easily. I don't want to have to be sort of digging into really long paragraphs to work it out. Again, it's important to realize that people reviewing this for us are our barristers. We've obviously got a lot of applications to look at. We're doing it. We're taking time out of our practices. You know, we need to be able to go through them relatively quickly. We don't want to spend, you know, hours trying to work out different bits from an application. So yeah, structure and clarity. As David has said, take your time on it. I know people say this all the time, but spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, they're so just unattractive. I have to say, it just colours the way that you read the whole application if there's some obvious mistakes. As again, as David says, probably the most common thing I'm going to say, but you know, we're not 39 Essex Street. It's amazing how many applications read saying that. I understand why the mistake's made, but it is a mistake. And
to be fair, I've got instructing solicitors who still send me briefs to 39 Essex Street. I don't know if they actually end up there first and then come over here.
We've still got clients that go there.
And I hope you refuse all of those briefs, David. So do get that right. Backing up with examples is really important evidence. And what I would say about that is you know, draw widely on your experiences. You know, all sorts of different experiences that you might have had can go to our criteria, the 5 criteria that we've got. You know, an obvious example, interpersonal skills, working in a shop, those kind of things can really be useful evidence. So don't think that something is sort of, I don't know, beneath the bar or beneath this process, because it almost certainly isn't. And I think probably everyone on this screen has done those kind of things, and they've contributed to their skill set that they have coming to the bar. So please do include all the relevant things that you have. I'll move on to interviews, unless I've missed any glaring ones. People can jump in, or David or anyone else, on the written application.
Ask a question, and then this is sort of to everyone who's done any sifting. I haven't done sifting of pupillage applications for a number of years, but I sift staff applications quite a lot. And people are now beginning to use AI when they are filling in their application forms. And I don't know if you've seen that, and I don't know if you've got anything that you would say about that. I'm presuming that people who are applying to become pupils don't do that. But certainly it's very obvious on staff forms, and it really puts me off.
I've never seen that, well, or at least I've never known that I've seen that on a pupillage application. I mean, I would probably not encourage that.
Yeah, I'd really caution against it. It's quite obvious to me when it's been used, but I don't know if anyone's had any experience of that.
I haven't been aware that I've had experience of it, but I think that, as Jake says, you know, maybe I have, but I think the point that Jake made is a good one, which is that part of what you're doing when you're reading the application is getting a sense of what this person's like, and part of that will be how they express themselves, because that's really important to being a barrister. And if it comes across in a kind of phony AI generated way, that's not helpful.
Great, thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
No. So moving on to the second part of my bit on this is interviews. First point I'd make is if you're lucky to come and have an interview here or anywhere else, make sure you know your written application inside out. I had a very embarrassing moment in a very good set, which I won't name them, but where basically I was asked something on my form which I hadn't refreshed my memory on. I hadn't looked back at the piece of work, and I basically couldn't remember, and I couldn't answer the question, and it was pretty excruciating. So do make sure you don't fall into that pitfall like I did. In terms of answering questions, it's really important, I think, to know that it's very unlikely, and certainly in my experience interviewing here, it's unlikely that there's going to be a right answer that we're looking for. You know, it's a very particular thing to be said. What we're interested in is how you reason and how you present. Again, like a broken record, because those are what matter to our 5 criteria. How you reason is obviously relevant to intellectual ability. How you present is obviously relevant to your expressive ability and your interpersonal skills. So those are the things you should be focused on. And coming off from that, it's really important to be structured in your answers, because that's what good advocacy is. It's clear to follow. You know where you are when the person is speaking. So again, you know, things like saying I've got 3 points on this at the beginning of an answer. If you can manage to do that at the beginning of your answer is great, because they're real signposts to those interviewing you, that you understand the importance of structure and the importance of clear advocacy. Again, coming off from that, take your time when answering. I certainly think it's really impressive in an interview if I ask a question and I see the person take a pause for 5 seconds to gather their thoughts. I think it makes you look in control. You may not be feeling like that, but it makes you look like that. And it does give you time to think, well, actually, what are my points on this? How am I going to structure this? So, you know, my tip is always, I mean, you don't want to do it every single question, but having a glass of water, having the question answered, have a quick sip of water, have a think. That's all good, I think.
I'd even go as far as to say, if you want to go back to something, if you feel you didn't answer something thoroughly and at the end you wanted to go back. It's better to come out of the interview knowing that you did everything you possibly could do and you've done a good job. And the interviewers, you know, and I think one key thing, both in the applications and the interviews, sorry to interrupt, Jake, but is that, you know, everywhere you go, people want you to succeed. They want you to succeed, so they're looking for good things, right? So you know, if you come back to something because you've had another thought, I think that would be better than not saying it.
I would definitely agree with that, and I also think it in and of itself it looks impressive, because it shows you've had the presence of mind to realise that there was something that you missed. So I definitely would agree with that.
Yeah, just to come in, I had that exact experience in my first round at 39, where I started answering a question and then realized I was going down a completely sort of cul-de-sac route where I was going to get very stuck. And I just said, actually, I'm sorry, I disagree with the position I just took. I'm going to change. And I you know, completely changed route. And then afterwards, in my mind, I was panicking a little bit, being like, oh gosh, I've just completely U-turned in the middle of my answer, and it was fine. And I'd say that's sort of one thing coming out of that is if you answer a question where you come at them and you think, oh, that wasn't a very good answer, try and just move on as quickly as possible and leave kind of the mistakes you've made behind, because often they probably won't be as bad as you think that they were.
Yeah, definitely. Final point before I hand back to David, because I know he's going to talk about interviews a bit more. It's an enormous cliche, I know, but I do think it's important to try to be yourself in the interviews, whilst obviously remaining professional. You know, not being inappropriate in any way. Not that anyone on this call would be, but I do think it's really important to remember that obviously what we want to do with our pupils is to have people who are going to join us for the rest of their careers and the rest of our careers. So, you know, it is important that you come across well and as someone that we would want to be our colleagues. And, you know, I don't think you need to put yourself in a box. I think you don't need to kind of come across as a real, you know, very, very stern or anything like that, or what you think a barrister might look like. Yeah, you know, try not to leave yourself at the door. Anyway, with that, I'll hand over to David.
Thanks, Jake. Completely agree with everything you said and everyone was saying just then on the interviews. You've stolen a lot of my lines, say 1-1 on that point. I will try and set out what to expect, though, in terms of the interview process, taking into account that everything Jake's just said and everyone else has said are really fantastic tips about how to actually then approach it. Slightly concerned because I am not just a pupillage supervisor and on the pupillage committee. We also have our CEO on the call, and I may well be about to get some things slightly wrong. So with that slight warning, and I'll ask Lindsay to jump in and correct me if I do get these slightly wrong. I will tell you now what we do in our interviews. So we paper sift first, as has been already explained, and then we typically invite around 60 candidates for first round interview. That first round interview will take place in March this year, and it would last typically around 20 minutes. I don't think we've changed that this year. And in both the first round interview and in the second round interview, there will be a legal problem, and there'll also be questions which are unseen, if you like. So you'll arrive and be given either a case or another piece of reading to do before your interview, and you'll prepare that, and then you'll have some questions on that, and then during the interview itself there'll also be some questions which you won't have had any chance to prepare. Those are particularly the types of ones where what Jake was saying about taking a moment to think through your answer are particularly valuable. But it's also true, of course, for the legal problem questions. You may well have had some time to prepare it, but the question that you're actually asked might be slightly different to what you're expecting. There'll also be questions which are designed to elucidate evidence of your competencies within the 5 areas. And much the same goes for answering those as it does for the written application. But of course, here you ought to be saying it out loud. Again, the evidence to back up the points you're making is absolutely essential to come across as a persuasive candidate who would make a good barrister. If you get through first round interview, we then typically invite around 15 candidates for second round interview. That will be about 45 minutes long, and you'll arrive around 1 hour before the second round interview to read a case or other piece of work again. And then, like with what I was just describing, there'll be questions on that, legal questions in the interview, as well as some other questions which you haven't had a chance to prepare before, and questions to test the various competencies. Something I found when I was applying, so I didn't get pupillage the first round of pupillage applications I made. 39 wasn't recruiting in that year, so obviously it was meant to be, because then when 39 were recruiting the following year, I did get pupillage here. But I did learn during that first round of unsuccessful pupillage applications, in which I did get, I think, 2 second round interviews, and then indeed through the other first round interviews and the following year when I did some more interviews, on those legal questions, which most chambers will ask. They'll set your piece of work and you'll have some time to prepare, and then you'll need to answer some questions on it. A mistake I made at first was, having analysed the case or whatever it was that I'd been given, I worked out my argument and it made logical sense, point 1, point 2, point 3. And I persuaded myself that that was the right answer, and I would then give that answer when asked. Often what people would do as follow-up questions, because this is very typical of how advocacy works in the English court system, is say, right, we hear what you say, Mr. Hopkins, or David, it'd probably be less formal than a judge. We hear what you say, David, on that. How about if we change some of the facts? How about if the court decided the contract had been breached, or that the supply of the goods wasn't in time? What would happen then? And my neat logical argument, 1, 2, 3, which had worked out, yes, the contract hasn't been breached, therefore 2, therefore 3, or the goods were supplied in time, therefore 2, therefore 3, would fall apart. And I'd sort of find myself thinking, oh, hang on, yes, that's a good point. What if that did change? And the tip is, once you've worked out what you're going to say, and once you've worked out your analysis of the case and so on, just give yourself at least 3 or 4 minutes at the end of the prep time to start tweaking some of the assumptions you've made, or the steps of logic that you've made. That is going to be good practice for real life as well, when you have to get into court and think about and advocate on these types of things, but it works for the interviews. At least I found it did, and I found I gave much better performances on the legal questions once I started playing with some of the analysis in a way which I anticipated my interviewers might. So hopefully that's a good summary of the process for the interviews. And Lindsay, I don't know whether I did make any mistakes, but you didn't jump in, so I'm going to assume I didn't.
All good. Great. The interview times that we have are on our website. I think most people will have their interview times on the website. They're all around the Easter holidays this year, so not great timings. So yeah, just do look at people's websites and make sure that you're free, because most chambers can't find you other times. You know, it's very difficult. We interview with the same panels so that everyone gets a very fair interview process. The same panel interviews everybody, and so to get those panels together again is very, very difficult. So we've given, you know, and other sets are the same. We tell you when those are. Keep that time free, because we won't be able to find you a different time. We won't be able, you know. So just bear that in mind. Was there anything else that the two of you were going to cover?
There was one because I've seen someone's asked the question in the Q&A. I'll cover that very briefly. It was on giving examples of leading cases that you've seen that a Chambers members have worked on in your application form. Do you need to mention what the case was about? Absolutely, yes. I mean, this is a really good example of the kind of evidence backing up what you've said. So indeed, as the, I think, questioner probably anticipated, would it show I actually read it and understood exactly? You've got it. Make sure once you've said, oh, I'm very interested in, or rather, I've seen that one of your members acted in the case of Cheshire West, then explain what it was about. I can't remember now what that case was about, but I'm sure I did know at the time. But certainly give a quick précis of it and why you found it interesting. And you may or may not get asked a question about it at your interview, but definitely prepare on the assumption that you will get asked.
That is literally about the most important court of protection case there is.
But funnily enough, Nicola, as you know, I've never actually done any court of protection work, but I found it really interesting at the time when I was applying. So,
Lindsay, I've just got mini pupillages to cover off. Quickly before I do that, just very quickly add to David's answer. I think another way you could do that, show that you've read the case, is you don't necessarily have to say, I'm really interested in Cheshire West. Cheshire West was a case about, I do know what it's about, but I won't go into it. But you could say something like, this was an interesting case because of the the judge's view on this. You can kind of show that you've read the case by building it into your answer, rather than kind of having to give a kind of more formulaic response. Our final point we'll cover is mini pupillages, which I'll do very briefly because I'm conscious that we've committed the first sin of advocacy by going over time. Mini pupillages, we now do a 1-day program rather than a 3-day or 2-day mini pupillages as is the norm. And what we do is we basically get around 20 people in, and we have a full program where we cover the full range of what we do in Chambers. There's some advocacy exercises, which we hope is basically a less time, but also you actually get more out of it. I'm conscious that people here will be probably most focused on pupillage rather than mini pupillage, but we have those 2 days in December and January. Actually, second one is on Monday. Applications open in the summer, so keep an eye on the website. Key thing to know about mini pupillage is that it's not assessed in any way. It's a really good way to learn more about Chambers and to meet us. So if you're thinking about applying next year, or aren't lucky this time around and you haven't done mini pupillage with us before, please do apply. And I will leave it there.
Although I would say that, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to get mini pupillages. It's difficult to get the time if you're, you know, working or studying or not in this country, or, you know, all sorts of different things, you know, carrying responsibilities, that kind of thing. It's not essential at all. I mean, it's not a criteria that we look at. You don't, you know, people, lots and lots of I'd say the majority of the pupils that we've taken haven't done mini pupillage with us, but you know, it's a good way for you all to, you know, get a feel. But we hope that if you haven't been able to do that in our set or any other set, that this today, you know, this afternoon is maybe a bit of a feel around, you know, what a set is like or feels like or looks like. So that's all I would say. I'm going to
just follow up on both of those points.
Yeah.
On mini pupillages for us specifically, and then also what you just said, Lindsay, about getting a feel and so on. It's a question that I know a lot of people often have is, how important are mini pupillages on my application? How many should I put down on my application form? Do I need to have done a mini pupillage with your chambers? As Lindsay's just said, you don't need to have done a mini pupillage with 39 Essex. It's not mandatory for us. It may be for some other sets. I know some sets make it mandatory, but what they often then do is say, if you're successful in getting a first round interview, we'll also give you a mini pupillage. So do look around, and again, it's about obsessively researching the chambers and making sure you know the specific position for each chambers. In terms of, are mini pupillages important? How many should you put down on your form and so on? They are important. They're not the be all and end all. It's not going to guarantee you get pupillage because you can put down 20 mini pupillages on your form. In fact, if anything, people might start thinking, why on earth have they done so many mini pupillages? There isn't a right answer. It's not, you know, going to be the case that you should put down exactly 6 and that's better than putting down 20 and it's better than putting down 2. I think I'd done 4 or 5 when I applied, but certainly what they are very good for is showing that you do know what the bar is about. So they are an excellent way of evidencing the fact that you do understand what a career at the bar is going to be like, and that is why they're important. And then again, that point about tailoring. You may well have done 20 mini pupillages. You might have done 5 in crime, 5 in family, 5 in commercial, 5 in public law, and you might be applying to a public law set. I mean, we do lots of things, so a big variety, but if you're applying to a very pure public law set, put down the 5 from public law. If you're applying to family, put down the 5 from family. Don't just put them all down blindly for each chambers. Tailor. And like I say, they are a great way of showing that you do understand what the bar is about. So sorry, just wanted to quickly add that in because I know it's a question people often have.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it to all the speakers that are still left to see if they've got any final comments. Whilst they're thinking of their final comments, I am just going to say that having done huge amounts of interviewing and reading of application forms, in the interview, just please do think about the structure of your answer. Take the time, as they've said, and and just be logical about it. Do remember about positive and open body language. It's barristers want barristers to be sort of confident, and so do think about that. It is important, the sort of softer sides. Try and remain calm and professional if you can throughout, and don't rush your answers. But the most important thing, I think, which has come out, almost everyone has said, is just prepare, research and prepare, and prepare what you think each set is going to want in terms of competencies. Have some evidence ready, so have some examples ready. Do some research on the set. Just prepare, and the same for your application forms. Right, does anyone have anything that they'd like to add on any of that sort of, other than good luck? Nicola.
I have noticed a question which says, are applications reviewed blindly? Does it matter which university you attended? I think we've made this clear, but just in case we haven't, no, it doesn't matter which university you've attended. We welcome applications from everywhere. We just want you to be good.
Yeah, and
not only that, I should say
we specifically university.
Sorry, I was going to say we specifically include as part of our marking criteria and guidance that we do not give any weight at all to which university it was, which is applied rigorously. So every university counts for exactly the same. Of course, what degree grade you got will make your marks go up and down, but the actual university that you obtained it from doesn't make any difference at all in our system.
Thanks, Nicola. Anybody else? Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add?
There was a question in the chat about the split between sort of broadly claimant and defendant work in public. I just wanted to say that so in our public law seat, we had one supervisor who did mainly defendant work, and we had one supervisor who did mainly claimant work. And as I was saying in sort of in our section, I think that's really one of the great strengths of Chambers, because I found it very interesting. And we also have members who do both sides, and being in conferences with those members, they were able to say the other side is going to be thinking about X, Y, and Z now. And although a solicitor maybe mainly do claimant work, they'll very much value the fact that the other person, that their barrister is on the Attorney General's panel and will be able to know exactly what the government is thinking about in those cases. So there'll be other people who'll be able to speak more about the split in Chambers in general, but I know certainly as a pupil, you got a sort of very good grounding in both parts of public law practice.
Great, thanks, Monty. And I think Sheraton's going to answer the one in writing as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I was just going to chip in as well that, we've often had instances where barristers have appeared before on the other side in court, and then the solicitors have watched them in court, thought they were utterly fabulous, and thought, next time I'm going to make sure you're on my side and not on the other side. So you're always being watched, basically, and there's always an opportunity to get instructed by a variety of different clients. But just on the public law side of things more generally, I mean, the part of being here that I enjoy the most is that when you get a case, because the public law work that we do is just so broad, the range of clients that you get exposure to here is really, really vast. And one of the bits of the job that I enjoy is when you get a particular case that comes in where you'd have several different hats that you would need to fit it with. And it's quite nice to be able to look around at all the different practice groups, because there's 55 people that sit in the public law team generally, but then there's lots of people that, because we've got so many cross practices here, that will be sitting in the commercial construction team, or they'll be sitting in the planning environmental property team. So when you've got these crossover cases, it's just fantastic to be able to say, we can actually house it here. We don't need you to go somewhere else to do this part of the job. We can actually do all of it. I mean, if I looked at, the breadth of public law, I just jotted down a couple of areas, but I mean, it's so vast, the type of areas that we cover. But, we've got tax, we've got EU, education, procurement, equalities. Obviously, we touched on the public inquiries and inquest work earlier. Loads of different JRs across all of those areas, financial services, the immigration, the civil liabilities, call to protection, obviously, is a big part of it all, and also the serious medical treatment cases as well. Loads of information law that we've been concentrating on, community care. I could go on and on, to be honest. The healthcare sector, the regulatory work that we do.
Social housing, education,
yes,
it goes on and on. But
it's all
unfortunately, Sheraton, we have gone on and on.
Yes.
And it's now after 6:10, and we were meant to finish at 6. I think we have answered everybody's questions. If we haven't, I apologise. And you can always email me by my email on the website. And if there's anything I can do, then email me and I'll try and answer you. Otherwise, I would like to say a huge thank you to all speakers who've given up their time this afternoon. Thank you all very, very, very much. You were all fabulous. And I would like to say a huge good luck to all of you who are going through this hideous process at the moment. I know it's horrible. Good luck. I'm sure you'll all do very, very well. And thank you very much for staying to the end and listening. Goodbye.